And the time starts now. We're working on a project with Oricon, which is my full-time job as People and Change Manager, working on behavioural insights, behavioural economics. And I don't want to ruin it for tomorrow morning's speakers because I know that's going to be the core subject of their dissertation. So I'm going to edge my way around the topic of behavioural insights, but tell you some stories about nudging the behaviour at a population level. We've got a project going in Victoria right now around the way drivers are experiencing a particular tunnel in Melbourne, and we're getting in the car with them, with cameras rolling and our iPhones out, and we're watching and talking to them through as they go through the tunnel, because a lot of what's going on for them is unconscious. They don't know why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. Why are they slowing down where they are? What are the things that are happening? And that's going to be kind of the heart of what I want to share today, is trying to get under the hood of people's behaviours when they don't even know why they're behaving the way they are themselves. We're going to look at choices in the aggregate, the mathematical certainty of people's behaviour when they all act over time in a particular place or interact with a gateway or a place to go through. Why do people do what they do? I'm going to give you 3 case studies at the back end of this. One about a transit lane that wasn't being very well used. One about a not-for-profit that built a brand new building that didn't quite turn out the way that they expected. And one about the development of a light rail. You've seen light rails turning up in all of our capital cities now, and the ones that have gone before us are thankfully teaching lessons to the ones that are being built today, and I'm in the middle of those stories. What do those stories all have in common? What do policies and systems, and we've seen some amazing presentations this morning, what do they all have in common? Of course, it's people, isn't it? But it's a wide variety and range of people, different ages, different demographics, different levels of education, different passions and ideas. People get fired up about all sorts of things, and sometimes they don't really know why they're getting fired up about things. The thing a person like me will do is get the video recorders running so we can watch all of them make their decisions over time. And maybe they don't all know why is that particular driver making that lane choice right now at this time? I don't know, and they don't either. But if you watch 10,000 people using that piece of freeway, over time you see these patterns emerge, and you begin to say, wow, 10% of the time, drivers make this choice at that time. What can we do to help make that better? William Winwood-Reade lived at the same time as my favourite author who wrote Sherlock Holmes. And he had this to say, and you'll see it turn up with a quote from Sherlock shortly. But he said, while man is an insoluble puzzle as an individual, in the aggregate he becomes a mathematical certainty. And that's kind of what I want to share with you today, is how is it that we behave as a mathematical certainty? I'm not a mathematician, I'm a neuropsychologist as it turns out, with other interests in sociology and so forth. I want to tell you a bit of a story that maybe unlocks this for you. It was recently I had to go to New Zealand to be participating in a defence bid, and I had to go out through our new electronic gates using my electronic passport. So a fancy way to speed things up apparently, although it doesn't work all the time when you've got 9 747s and A380s at the gates trying to all come through. But I had the privilege of going out through an E-gate and in through an E-gate in New Zealand, and then out through an E-gate and then in through an E-gate in Australia. So I got 4 of them in 2 days, and a remarkable thing happened to me. I don't know if we're going to have a show of hands if anyone used those facilities as you've gone in and out. Right, nearly everybody here. Tell me if this happened to you. I'm only going for 2 days, so I've got a carry-on luggage and I've got a backpack. And I put them together, so you roll them behind you. And I go up to the E-gate, put my passport in, and you're allowed into this little booth. So I go into the booth, but with my luggage, right? And the luggage is standing behind me, take off my glasses, do my photo, and the machine's not working. And it's got this blinking red light. And this lovely security guard comes over and he says, it doesn't like your bags. Can I take them for you? So I back out of the gate and nervously hand in my bags, wondering if they're going to, make it to the other side. Take the photo, go through. That happened 4 times in a row. Different security guards every time. If that happened to me 4 times, how often does it happen to those security guards every day of every week of every month, and still nobody's thought to fix the machine? It's not that hard, right? You tell the machine, the thing standing behind the person is not a child. Right? It's not moving. It's not hard. Facial recognition would tell it it's not a person. Nobody's done it. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in solving painful problems that other people just don't have the wherewithal or will or money or time, or maybe they haven't noticed that that's what's happening. Believe you me, I got myself into trouble by mentioning it to the fourth security guard and nearly got dragged outside facing the security. I said, no, I'm not complaining. But the point is, a lot of what we do is just non-conscious, right? It's unconscious. We're going through life. I'm in a rush. I've got to make it to the flight. Who cares that the guy... Well, I care. That's what irritates me when those systems are broken and people aren't doing something about it. David Eagleman recently wrote a fantastic book. He's a neuroscientific researcher and his passion is consciousness. And he wrote a book called Incognito, which unpacks the science of consciousness. And I got really upset when I read the book. I got to the last chapter, and I'm sorry to ruin it for you if you're going to read the book. The punchline is that 97% of our humanity is unconscious. And when I read that, I was like, that can't be true. I'm a very conscious human being. There's no way that's true. And then I went backwards through the book and I realised, you know what? He's actually right. You think about it. Your circulatory system, your liver, keeping track of the level of salts in your blood system, the homeostasis that's going on, your blood pumping and circulatory system, the lymphatic system, the spine, the autonomic nervous system, the brain, most of the brain stem, the midbrain, the frontal lobes, the whole right hemisphere. In fact, there's only a tiny 3 centimetre cubic area at the front of your frontal cortex on the left-hand side that's actually conscious. What's the point in saying all that? You didn't come to listen to a lecture about neuroscience. The point is that human being, along with all the other human beings, are using this lecture hall. And most of the time, we're making decisions without really thinking about it. And that's the problem when you go to do customer research or you want voice of the customer feedback about your product is people often don't know why they feel what they feel. In fact, sometimes they don't know what they feel. And that's why we get in the car and we go through the tunnel with them with the cameras rolling, because we want to see them making reactions to what's going on. Oh, it was the light. No, it's actually the position of the speed camera. No, wait, it's the background noise of the truck slowing down. And then you get to interview them and make them more aware of the choices that they're making. You'd be fully aware if you've read Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman or any of the other behavioural researchers. You know that we make a lot of choices and we've got a lot of heuristics and stereotypes and stuff going on inside. And we all share a bunch of internal, rapid-fire, your brain is lazy decision-making processes. I was surprised in preparing for today to learn that the list has now exceeded 190 anchors and mental heuristics that we have that have been researched. My favourites are, just for reference, the halo effect. That's, if you've got one good attribute, it tends to affect all the others, and most of the research is, unsurprisingly, on beauty. The laziness effect, we tend to take the course of least resistance. I love this new one, it's the IKEA effect. We value things more when we build them or we have some participation in constructing them. Loss aversion, so when you lose something, it feels twice as difficult for you as the cost of purchasing it. Attribution error, so we tend to think that things about the choices that people make rather than the circumstances they find themselves in. Authority bias, now you would think this is going down, but it isn't going down. Non-consciously, you still are taking me more seriously because I put a jacket on than if I had come up without one, and we're all prone to that. Sadly. Omission bias, we tend to say that when you do something, that's worse than if you don't do something, and we tend to treat those things more violently, especially in court. And causation bias, we tend to think that when things happen together, one thing's causing the other. I only mention those again, not to give you a lecture in psychology, but just to think, as I give you these 3 case studies, how difficult it is to get customers to understand why they're making the choices they're making. Pascal Borgia said, once we understand the choices people make unconsciously, consciously and mostly unconsciously, we can support their behavioural change and improve their experience. So I'm talking in that area where people don't understand what's going on. Beautiful photos like this, I'm sure, are going to occur all the way through the conference. You know, designers, I work for an engineering firm, and they like designing circular things and forget to ask people where they'd prefer to walk. So back to my favourite author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and he managed to put a bit of Winwood-Reade's language into Sherlock's mouth here. He said, okay, you can't foretell what any one man will do, but you can with certainty tell what an average person will do, right? Over time. So here we go. Just before I hit you with the 3 case studies, understand behavioural insights and behavioural economy is not new. It's been around in academic circles for a while, started with the Nudge Unit in the UK, made it to Australia. We've got one in PM&C, the Beta Unit. We've got, you know, Department of Premier and Cabinet in New South Wales, Victoria. One of the interesting things about Nudge in Australia is that since 2015, 42 case studies have been published, and 80% of them only deal with one kind of nudge, and that's public education and communication. That's changing the font, changing the colour, changing the language, putting up big posters. 80% of the 42 published stories just use that one nudge. And there's, as you can see there, there's a plethora of alternatives. You saw it in this morning's presentation. We had a 7x7 matrix of alternatives, right? It's massive, but we tend to only use one. And I have a feeling that's because of the universities that we've been raising people in to teach them about communication. And the last caveat before I give you the 3 stories is, don't be down on behavioural insights. It's not a dark art. It's not being run by, you know, evil-hearted politicians who are trying to destroy our lives, or at least not the people I hang out with. The ones I hang out with are trying to solve wicked problems, and they're not getting the answers from the public that they're expecting. They want to help. And so these 3 stories are fairly simple. This one goes back to 2014 when one of our competitors' engineering firms won the bid to help this local government figure out how to turn a transit lane that was for buses and motorcycles and taxis into a T2 lane, you know, the kind of lane where you're supposed to have a passenger with you. And the end of their research said that 25% of the cars using this piece of highway were eligible to be on the T2 lane. And on the basis of that, they went and spent millions and millions and millions of dollars widening the road and putting in a T2 lane, which is fantastic. I live in that city now. I'm so happy. I use that T2 lane as often as I have a passenger. However, in the month of its opening, only 2% of eligible vehicles were using it. That's a bit baffling, isn't it? What's going on? They painted the entrance this lovely green colour. They put up the signs, you know, $2 million has been spent widening this road, all the rest of the things, ad campaigns on TV, local, you know, footy stars had been up kind of singing its praises, but people weren't using it. So I did an international literature review to find out what are cities around the world doing, and we found out Toronto's got black and white T2 lanes, and Lincoln City's using red, and over in New Zealand they're using teal, and I begin to think, I wonder if it's the colour of the lane. I wonder if there's something going on there psychologically. Onto Google, no research. Oh well, we're just going to have to play. So you can imagine it's difficult to ask the population what their colour preference would be, right? I don't know what you would say if you were interviewed by me about what your colour preferences were for a T2 lane. It's not going to get very far. So we just said to the local government, just pick one and run it for a month and see if it changes. I mean, it's not that expensive, 10, 15 grand to repaint the entry, right? So it was blue, then we painted it green, then we put sort of yellow edges around it. The colour that ultimately turned out to work a treat, and it got usage up to 12% in the first month and then 25% in the next month, was maroon. Now, I can't tell you hand on heart why maroon works. It's nuts. But I don't know if you've noticed here in Brisbane, and if you've been in Sydney or Melbourne recently, T2 lanes everywhere are going maroon. This is a great colour to use, and I'm sure there's a hidden PhD there for somebody if they're interested in the colour of transit lanes. So down to something a little more mundane than that. A simple building. What if you're an NGO and you've got limited resources and you serve the population? You run relationship counselling, you run all sorts of interactive workshops, and the building you're in doesn't work, your staff are unhappy, and you spend a couple $1 million building a new building. You want to find out if it's working, right? Customer service, inventories are up, customer satisfaction's up, but the staff are miserable and turnover's up. So we sent a team in to sit in the dining room and just talk to the staff and support their change. We did a journey map, not for customers but for staff, and talked to them about their experience. And it turned out that little things like the blinds didn't work in the middle of the day. The building went up in winter and now it was summer and the angles were all wrong. And there was no water in the creche, and when there were fighting couples, the husbands and wives couldn't come in different doors, and there was only one car park, and all sorts of things they hadn't thought about. And so we had the opportunity then with the designers to redesign all of that stuff on the basis of observed behaviour and conversations with these individuals. Last story before we finish. A light rail vehicle operator came to us and said, "We're really worried about the way that this light rail interacts with all the other modes of transport in the city. What about pedestrians who ride halfway and then jump on the tram and then get off and go on a train? What about the train guys who have to make their way across 3 lanes of traffic to get to the station?" And we said, that's fantastic for you to be thinking about this way before building the light rail. Really glad to be having this conversation. So what we did was got on the phone and talked to the constructors of the light rail in London, talked to the BI unit in London, the nudge unit, picked up the phone and rang the Sunshine Coast LRV. One had just gone up in Canberra, talked to them and said, "What do you do about intermodality?" And they said, "You'd be really surprised how unconscious people are." I said, I wouldn't. He said, "You've got to design it as if they're stupid." I said, "Don't ever let that be said in public." There you go, I said it. You've got to make it really simple. Treat them like they're deaf or blind and provide all the wayfinding you can. So anyway, I went back to the chief engineer and I said, I'm just not sure treating people like they're stupid is very clever. So can we just go to the pain points in this community? Tell me the 3 places where you're most worried. And it turned out to be a special needs school, a park with a fence where they were walking dogs and the LRV went through the middle of that, and a spot where the cycle lane came kind of in the middle of the lanes of traffic on either side and ended up at the LRV station, or the way it was designed. And I said, why don't we just go out to customers and talk to them? Of course, they can't talk to you about their experience because they haven't had one yet, but just talk to them about how they might make choices around those things. Now, you can imagine a conversation with the mums and dads and children in a special needs school where children have autism and ADHD and sight and hearing trouble is a very different conversation to the one you're having with the cycling union of that city, or even the conversation you're having with the people who use commercial vehicles in that district. But as we pieced all of those things together, we kind of decided to lay each of the stations out in a segmented way, in a horizontal way, and we just said, what does this look like if we treated everybody like a radio channel? Everybody's got a channel and we've got to get them all to the station and off the station together, and just switching the view a bit because they're into 3D animation and VR and all that crazy stuff and they love it, it's great. But this kind of way of thinking caused them to segment the population out enough to start thinking about all their different needs. And now the designs have changed precinct by precinct, and I'm glad of it. So what are the takeaways? I want you, as you apply change theory, as you listen to the speakers tomorrow, who no doubt will unpack the science of behavioural insights and give you a whole lot more to think about in this field, I want you to think about how people behave in the aggregate, and next time you go through something as simple as a security gate, pause to think if your experience reflects everybody else's experience or not. When you find it frustrating to find the toilets, or you expected to see signage but it's not there, could you provide designers a bit of feedback about that and help them do it better next time? Or be like everybody else and just walk across the middle of the circle and kill the grass. Realise that populations can be analysed when you watch them over time. Realise that almost all of our behaviour is unconscious, and it's hard to access people's opinions about why they make the decisions they make. But you do need to do that. You do need to interact with populations about the choices they're making, even to make them aware that they're making those choices. Nudge, hopefully, at least my three little stories, I hope you can see it's not just a wicked art. It's not always used to nudge people in the direction of a criminal activity or what have you. And that population behaviour can be used to create better design, and ultimately that's one of the functions that I have at the moment, is to help create better design. Thank you.